The Whispering Cathedral, a dark fantasy story of faith, madness, and a secret that should never have been unearthed. Soft wind through hollow stone corridors, faint echoes of distant chanting. In the heart of the drowned city of Raltor, where fog never lifted and bells rang with no hands to toll them, there stood the Cathedral of St. Vera. It had been abandoned for nearly a century. Yet every night, its bells still sang, each chime softer, more sorrowful than the last. Most said it was the wind, but Brother Elias knew better. He was the last monk of St. Vera, a man whose faith had outlived his brothers, his order, and perhaps his sanity. 1. The bells that never ceased. Low bell tone reverberates footsteps on wet stone. Elias had lived alone in the cathedral for 20 years. He prayed, he cleaned, he tended to the graves of his fallen brothers. But the bells never stopped ringing. They rang even when the ropes were severed. They rang even when the towers were empty. And sometimes the bells whispered his name, Elias. He tried to ignore it at first, believing it to be grief or exhaustion. But as the nights grew colder, the whispers became clearer. They began to speak in voices he recognized, voices of the dead monks. We are beneath, brother, beneath the altar, to the hidden door. One stormy evening, rain striking stained glass, Elias finally broke. He descended into the crypt, carrying only a candle and his rosary. The air below was colder than any winter wind. Moss covered the walls, and every step echoed like thunder. Behind the altar, he discovered something that should not have been there. A sealed iron door, marked with the sigil of the Archangel Vera, but carved upside down. He ran his hand along the sigil and felt the groove's pulse. Alive. Forgive me, Lord, he whispered, and pulled the latch. The door opened with a scream of rust and bone. 3. The choir below. Low hums of hundreds of voices in the dark. Beyond the door lay a staircase spiraling into blackness. Elias descended for what felt like hours until the candle sputtered and died. But he was not in darkness. The walls themselves glowed faintly, veins of crimson light pulsing like heartbeats. And there, in the center of a vast underground hall, he saw them. Rows upon rows of mummified monks kneeling in prayer. Their mouths were open, their throats were hollow, and from those empty throats came the sound of the bells. The bells were not ringing, the dead were singing. Elias fell to his knees, trembling. Saints, preserve us. What is this blasphemy? A voice answered, not from above, but from within the rows of the dead. The last hymn must be sung, Brother Elias. 4. The saint who lied. From the shadows something stepped forward. A towering figure draped in silver vestments, a halo of black fire above its head. It was Saint Vera, the cathedral's patron, or something wearing her form. You prayed to me, it said gently. You gave me your years. Your brothers gave me their lives. But faith is never free. You're not her, Elias whispered. The saint was pure. The figure smiled. Purity is for mortals. I am what your prayers made me. Hunger wrapped in holiness. Wind howls through stone cracks. Heartbeats grow louder. Your brothers fed me their voices so I could sing to the heavens. But heaven turned away. It reached out a hand. You, Elias, will be the final verse. 5. The Song of Blood. As it touched him, Elias saw flashes of the past. Monks willingly offering their throats, believing they were serving divine purpose. But every prayer had only built another layer of her prison, and the saint, or demon, had learned to feed. He stumbled back, clutching his crucifix. If faith made you, he shouted, then I will unmake you. He tore his rosary apart, scattering the beads like drops of light. Each bead hit the floor, and the corpses screamed. Wails of 1,000 voices crumbling stone. Elias began to chant, not the holy words, but the ones forbidden to mortal tongues. words found in the cathedral's oldest scripture, the unbinding psalm. The halo above the false saint cracked, the walls bled, and the bells fell silent for the first time in 100 years. 6. The fall of the cathedral. Above ground, the cathedral began to shake. Pillars split, stained glass shattered. Lightning struck the bell tower, sending it crashing into the streets below. Elias emerged, burned, broken, but alive. Behind him, the cathedral collapsed. Not inward, but downward, as if devoured by the earth itself. Thunder, then distant silence. He looked to the dawn sky, whispering through bloodied lips. Faith is not light. Faith is the shadow that endures when light is gone. Then he fell to his knees, smiling faintly. The bells were silent, and for the first time, Raltor slept in peace. 7. Epilogue, the new bell. Soft wind through ruins, faint chime in distance. A century later, pilgrims returned to rebuild the city. They found no trace of the cathedral, except one thing, a single bronze bell buried deep in the mud, engraved with a single line. When you pray, beware what listens. They placed the bell in a new chapel, and that night, when it rang just once, a voice whispered in the wind, Elias. Ashes of the Moon Queen. They say the Moon Queen was once a mortal woman, luminous as a silver flame, beloved by all who beheld her. But the gods, in their jealous cruelty, offered her a gift she did not seek. Immortality, bound not to her joy, but to her sorrow. Her name was Selene. Sound cue, slow, echoing chimes of a forgotten cathedral bell. She walked the twilight lands where shadows lay like silk over the ruins of kingdoms. Her skin, pale as moonlight itself, gleamed in the darkness, her hair trailing like rivers of shadow. Villagers whispered her name, fearing what they did not understand, that the Moon Queen would weep over the living, mourning the mortality she had been stolen from. Sound cue, crackling fire, faint heartbeat in the background. But immortality was not her only curse. Selene's heart had been given to a man, the captain of her guard, a knight of steadfast loyalty, known only as Kale. They had loved as mortals do, fleeting and desperate, until the gods decided that no mortal heart could remain whole beside the divine. Sound cue, distant thunder, followed by heavy rainfall. One night, under a blackened sky, Kyle betrayed her. He did not know the depth of the god's curse. In a moment of fear and ambition, he struck her down with silver-forged steel, the only weapon that could wound an immortal. But Selene did not die. She rose, her blood igniting in spectral flame, eyes glowing with a grief so deep it could drown stars. Kyle fell to his knees, his honor shattered, as the Moon Queen's laughter, both sorrowful and terrifying, echoed through the ruins. Sound cue, screeching wind, glass breaking, a soft, mournful female wail. From that night onward, she wandered the land, neither living nor dead. Mortals spoke of seeing her dancing atop cliffs during eclipses, her tears turning into frost, her footsteps leaving silvery ash in the soil. And in the ash, the faint heartbeat of Kale's remorse lingered, for he too could not die, cursed to witness her immortal sorrow. Sound cue, slow violin, almost imperceptible heartbeat overlay. Centuries passed. Kingdoms rose and fell, rivers dried, and mountains crumbled. Selene's heart, though immortal, bore the weight of endless betrayal. Each moon, she would wander the forests of her solitude, tracing the memories of love lost, seeking a salvation the gods had stolen from her. Yet one night, beneath a sky fractured with falling stars, she encountered another soul, a young woman, mortal, fierce, and fearless. She had wandered into the ruins seeking shelter from storms, and in her eyes, Selene saw the reflection of what she had once been. Sound cue, gentle rain pattering, a soft crackle of a campfire. Celine approached, a specter of beauty and despair. The mortal trembled, yet did not flee. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am the Moon Queen," Celine whispered, voice like glass breaking. "And I carry a sorrow older than time itself." The mortal spoke then, with the courage of one who dared to defy the night. "Then let me walk with you, even if only for a while." For the first time in 1,000 years, Celine felt a spark of hope, but the gods, cruel and meticulous, had one last decree. Any mortal who touched the Moon Queen would be consumed by her grief, their soul forever entangled with hers. Sound cue, rising storm, a low, ominous hum. By dawn, the mortal was gone, her form dissolved into silvery ash, leaving Celine weeping at the edge of the world. And yet, in the ash, a faint heartbeat remained. A promise, a curse, a fragment of love that could never be fulfilled. Celine lifted her gaze to the cold moon. "I am bound," she whispered to the stars. "To sorrow, to love, to the endless night. And I will endure, even as the world crumbles beneath my feet." Sound cue. Silence, broken by a single echoing wolf howl. And so she walked still, the Moon Queen of Ashes, immortal in body, eternal in grief, a shadow among shadows. Mortals tell her story in hushed tones, a warning, a lament, a tale of a love that even the gods could not allow to die. Sound cue, soft, fading chimes, like a memory dissolving in fog. Her legacy is written not in kingdoms or monuments, but in the ash of hearts she has touched. And every century, when the moon bleeds red, her tears fall upon the world, a reminder that love, once cursed, is never truly lost, but never truly free either. Sound cue, fade out with wind and a single heartbeat, echoing, slowing until silence. Narrator, soft, fading. The Moon Queen endures, and in her sorrow, the world remembers the cost of betrayal, the cruelty of gods, and the tragedy of love that cannot die. They say knights are sworn to light, to honor, to protect the innocent. But every oath has a price, and some oaths are not made to kings nor to God. This is the tale of Sir Aldrich of Varro, once the most noble knight of the Western Marches, and the man whose soul was swallowed by the very shadow he swore to destroy. 1. The Oath Beneath the Blood Moon. Wind moans across a dead battlefield. The war had ended, but the land had not healed. Charred banners lay in the mud. The crows had grown fat on human flesh. Sir Aldrich walked among the corpses of men he once called brothers. In the center of the field lay the body of his king, impaled upon a broken sword, eyes staring blankly toward the red horizon. Aldrich knelt, blood dripping from his gauntlet. He had failed to protect his liege. He had failed his vow. That night, as the moon rose blood-red over Varro, he whispered his second vow, not to the heavens, but to the dark. "If light has forsaken me," he said, "then I shall swear myself to the abyss until my king's vengeance is done." Soft whispering voices swirl in the wind, and something heard him. 2. The shadows packed. The night grew silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A figure emerged from the fog, tall, cloaked in black, eyes like dying stars. "You seek vengeance," the figure murmured. "I can grant it." "At what cost?" Aldrich demanded. "Only what all mortals must pay eventually," it said. "Your soul." Aldrich hesitated, and then he nodded, because vengeance, in that moment, felt more sacred than salvation. The being touched his chest. Pain ripped through him. His veins burned like molten iron. His armor turned black. his eyes dimmed to embers, and a mark, a spiral of shadow, seared across his breastplate. When the pain subsided, he rose, not as Sir Aldrich of Varro, but as the Black Knight. Chains rattle faintly in the distance. 3. The hunt for the betrayer. Weeks later, the kingdom whispered of a knight who rode at dusk, his armor like midnight, his sword drinking the light around it. He spoke no words, left no prisoners. His target was Lord Calwyn, the man who had betrayed the king for a foreign crown. Aldrich hunted him across 10 villages and 3 provinces. Everywhere he went, the sky dimmed earlier than it should have. Children said the sun fled from him. When Aldrich finally cornered Calwyn in the ruins of an old abbey, the traitor trembled. "Aldrich," Calwyn begged, "you were a man of honor." "I was," Aldrich growled, "before honor failed my king." And with one swing, Calwyn's head rolled across the marble floor. Echo of steel, then silence. But when Aldrich looked down, the blood pooling around him was black. He wiped his blade, but the stain wouldn't fade. 4. The curse awakens days past. The corpses of Calwyn's men began to rise. Their eyes glowed faintly, empty, lifeless, and they whispered in voices that weren't their own. "Aldrich, he calls you deeper. The oath is not done." The shadow had kept its promise. Vengeance was granted. But Aldrich soon realized the price was still being collected. Every soul he struck down now followed him, chained to his armor, bound to his darkness. At night he could hear them, their screams. Inside his head, soft whispers, overlapping voices. "Why did you kill me? Save us, Aldrich." He began to wander aimlessly, unable to rest. Villages barred their doors when he approached. Priests refused him absolution. The bards began to sing of the knight who outlived his god. 5. The return to Varro. 10 years later, Aldrich returned to his homeland. The once golden city of Varro was now a ghost town. Its people had fled, its cathedral burned. At the city gates, he found a single living soul, a child, barely 10, standing in the rain. "Sir Knight," the boy said, "my mother said you'd return. She said you'd save us." Aldrich knelt, his shadow stretching long behind him. "There is no saving what is already lost," he murmured. But the boy reached out and touched his gauntlet. The black metal cracked, and for the first time in years, Aldrich felt warmth beneath it. The child smiled. "You're not a monster," he said. Soft, hopeful strings rise briefly, then fade into wind. 6. The whisper beneath the cathedral. The boy led him to the ruins of Varro's cathedral. Below it, in the crypts, something pulsed, like a giant's heartbeat. The dark voice spoke again. "You have served well, my knight. Now complete your oath. Deliver the child to me." Aldrich froze. "No," he whispered. "He is innocent." "So was your king," the voice hissed. "All things end in shadow." The walls began to bleed darkness. Chains shot from the floor, wrapping around Aldrich's arms. The boy screamed, and Aldrich, in a desperate act, raised his sword and struck the chains apart. "You will not take another soul," he roared. Thunder cracks, the sound of metal snapping. 7. The final duel. The shadow took form, a colossal wraith with Aldrich's own face. "You cannot kill me," it laughed. "I am you." Aldrich raised his blade. "Then I shall slay myself 1,000 times, if it means freeing even one soul." The duel shook the crypt, steel clashing against shadow, light against endless black. Every strike tore another fragment of his cursed armor away. Finally, with one final roar, Aldrich drove his sword through the wraith's heart. Light burst from the wound, blinding, searing, pure. 8. Redemption in ruin. When the light faded, the crypt was silent. The wraith was gone. Aldrich's armor lay shattered, and beneath it, his body was pale, human again. The boy knelt beside him, tears in his eyes. "Sir, will you wake up?" Aldrich smiled faintly. "When the light returns to Varro," he whispered, "tell them the knight kept his oath." He closed his eyes. Outside, for the first time in decades, dawn broke over Varro. Soft choir fades in, the sound of morning bells. They say knights are sworn to light, to honor, to defend the innocent. But sometimes the path to light leads through shadow. And though Sir Aldrich's tale ended in darkness, his legend became the dawn of a new age. Because in Varro the sun finally rose again,